Revenge of the Bully, Chapter 13, The Storm Before the Storm. Despite my mom's surprise Loot's Crowd announcement, the days following my walk with Jessica turned out to be some of the best ever. Jessica and I spent a lot of time together, and she was really easy to talk to, particularly with no-mask lunatics making faces at me. Trevor and Josie seemed equally happy. Josh and Wendy were together all the time, and even Kayla scowled less when Rishi was about. Fernanda would be proud of us. When Saturday rolled around, we actually won another football game, which added to the excellent week I was having. Trevor was great on defense, while Josh delivered bone-jarring hit after hit. Of course, the pipsqueak behind him with the ball got most of the credit, thanks to Rishi's constant tweets. But I didn't mind. As long as we were winning and the boss was happy, I could deal with the extra attention. Yes, I had allowed myself to enjoy the week by keeping the darker thoughts out, but that could only last so long, especially with me. I knew that any day, at any moment, Mrs. Lutzkraut would pop back into my life. I also knew that something else I'd been dreading was now only days away. Saturday night was the big grand opening of Mama's, and soon after that my mom would go to review it, and soon after that a horrible review of Mama's would appear in the newspaper, and soon after that the boss would come after me. I shuddered as I walked onto the football field for Monday practice. What would the boss do to me? The air on the field felt still and heavy, the calm before the storm. Apparently, I wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. Coach Lombardi paced back and forth, looking very agitated. He called us together. "Gentlemen, do you know what's happening this Saturday?" I doubted he was referring to Mama's opening. "This Saturday is the biggest sporting event of your lives. Bigger than the Super Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the World Series, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup, the World Cup, the Kentucky Derby." My mind began to drift. I stared at a cloud high above the school building. The cloud began to look a little bit like the boss smoking a cigar, so I turned my attention back to Coach Lombardi. "Bigger than the Indianapolis 500, Wimbledon, the Masters, the Westminster Dog Show." But I couldn't get my mind off the boss. He still hadn't paid us for putting up flyers, and now I was going to be working for him cleaning tables. The truth is that I was too afraid of the boss to ask for the money he owed us. "Bigger than the Tour de France, the Summer Olympics, the Winter Olympics, the Ironman, the French Open, the World Table Tennis Championship." Coach?" Josh interrupted. "Yes. Are you saying it's a big game Saturday?" "Of course it's a big game. It's bigger than all of them together. It's Wyndham!" Just hearing the word Wyndham sent shivers down my spine. I hadn't seen the twin brutes, Bart and Bruno, since the first practice when I sent them flying. I knew that on Saturday I wouldn't be so lucky. "That's right," Coach Lombardi continued. "We have to beat the Wyndham Bombers. We have to win the game." By now he was turning red. Coach Manuel brought him a cup of water, but he knocked it away and kept going. "I have to win it one time, just one time. Bring your A game. Bring your A game. Please win the game for me. The whole town will be here. With our recent success, we're only 20-point underdogs. Victory is within reach. Can you taste it? I have to beat Bill Belichick once in my life." Coach Manuel turned to us. "You heard the coach. Big game Saturday. Start practice." I wandered out to the huddle and knelt down. As Hector called out the plays for us to run, I tried to piece everything together happening in my life. The Wyndham game was during the day on Saturday before Mama's opening. That meant if we lost, all the meals served that night would be free thanks to Rishi's stupid ad. The boss would go broke, and I'd go missing. If I made it to Sunday morning, it would be a miracle. I took a deep breath. There was, however, a chance we would win Saturday, even with Bart and Bruno gunning for me. After all, we were on a roll. All I had to do was hide behind Josh during the day and bus tables for the boys from Chicago at night. I can handle that, I told myself. Maybe everything would be okay after all. I stood up, let out a sigh of relief, and gazed into the stands. The second I saw her bright orange hair, I knew everything was not all right. Not by a long shot. Mrs. Lutzkraut sat in the middle of the yellow benches wearing a gold dress and holding a black G-Men flag. She saw me looking at her and gave a little wave. As if seeing her wasn't bad enough, Hector, AJ, JJ, Phil, and Joe all waved back. "What are you doing?" I yelled. "Why are you waving at Mrs. Lutzkraut?" Hector smiled. "She's our new tutor, Rodney. She's helping us with reading and math and stuff. She's real nice. No, she isn't. AJ interrupted. Rodney, she really likes football. She asks us all sorts of stuff about it in her games. Don't tell her anything. She's evil. I can't believe you guys. Is she tutoring the whole offense? No, Hector said. She's tutoring the defense, too. I began to panic. You guys can't let her tutor you. It's some trick of some kind. They all laughed and looked at each other knowingly. She said you'd say that, Hector explained. She's got you fooled. Trust me, she'll ruin everything. She's not going to ruin anything, JJ tried to assure me. She can only help us. For instance, she helps me memorize our playbook. Look, she's even waving our flag. I was desperate. Josh, tell them they're wrong. Tell them about camp and how Mrs. Lutzkraut tried to ruin it. Camp, Josh said, staring off into space. Yes, camp. Tell them. Well, at camp. Yes, Josh grinned. At camp, we had fire. It was useless. My teammates wouldn't listen to me. We practiced another play, and I tried not to glance at Mrs. Lutzkraut, but something made me want to take one more look. Pretending I was stretching, I turned my body slightly toward the stands, but she was gone. I looked in every direction, from the school to the track to the woods and back again. Mrs. Lutzkraut was nowhere in sight. In less than a minute, she had completely vanished, along with any hope that my great week could possibly continue. Why so glum, Rodney? My mom stuck her head into the TV room where I was trying not to think about Mrs. Lutzkraut. Because everyone's too dumb to see the truth, I answered. I see. Well, maybe dinner tonight will cheer you up. What are you making? My dad asked, turning down the volume on the Food Network. Pot roast? The prospect of a good meal was already working on him. No, we're going out on a review. With the windbag. Ah! My dad and I whined in unison. Not the windbaggers, I pleaded. Mr. Windbagger was one of the most annoying men in all of Ohio. Now, I have to review a restaurant, and besides, Fred and Ethel are very nice. Donald, you know Fred has been trying to speak with you about that job opportunity. I think it's very important that I am not going into business with Fred Windbagger, my dad said flatly. Donald, Fred's done very well for himself. This is not the job market to hold out for the ideal position. I'd rather go hungry, my dad lied. Donald, just listen to him. That's all I'm asking. Ethel thinks it's going to be a wonderful idea. Is Penny going? I asked, noticing her walk by in her pajamas. No, we hired a babysitter. But why can't I stay? Because, Rodney, Mr. Windbagger is a huge fan of yours. And he specifically asked if you were coming. I think it's the least you can do to show up and thank him. We're leaving in 20 minutes. Go get dressed. I groaned as I pulled myself off the couch. My dad shut off the TV and held his head for a minute. Well, at least we're in this together, he announced. Mr. Windbagger frowned as he read the menu. We had met him and Mrs. Windbagger at the restaurant 5 minutes earlier, and he'd already complained that there was no bread on the table and the parking spaces were too small for his car. His frown deepened. What kind of food is this anyway? My mom replied, It's Asian fusion. This restaurant is primarily focused on Japanese and Thai cuisine. Don't they eat steak in Taiwan? I don't see a T-bone listed on the menu. Actually, my mother explained, the food is from Thailand, not Taiwan. Heck, I don't care if it's from Times Square. They should serve steak. Gloria, you want to review a good place, you go to the Ponderosa. They got a good T-bone. I'll keep it in mind, my mom said. Now let's see, he continued, studying the menu. Ethel, what's that fancy dish I get down there at the Happy Walk? Fried rice? Yeah, that's it. Where's the fried rice? I don't see any, my mom answered apologetically. Maybe you'd like the pad thai? It's like Thai spaghetti. I guess. If I'm still hungry, I can always grab a burger on the way home. So how's the job hunt going, Donald? My dad adjusted his knife and spoon on the tablecloth. He seemed to be having a difficulty coming up with an answer. Eventually he managed, Swell. I'm working part-time now. My mom cut in. You know, Fred, it's been tough for Donald. He had a wonderful position at Vanderdick Enterprises, but when the mall deal fell through, they had to downsize their operation. Mr. Windbagger nodded his head. Tough one, Donald. I read about that. Those darn tree huggers ruin everything. I felt my face redden. Evidently, Fred Windbagger didn't know that in camp I pretty much made sure they didn't cut down the forest to build houses in a mall. My dad spoke up. Personally, I'm glad the deal was blocked. Saving the woods was the right choice. He winked at me and I felt better. Not everyone shared his sentiment. Baloney! Mr. Windbagger exploded. Donald, I think you've been eating too much of the seaweed stuff on the menu. Makes you soft. Remember, I'm looking for an assistant. I need a real go-getter. Ideas like saving some squirrels won't get you too far in the business world. I've always done fine, my dad responded, and I haven't had to sacrifice my ideals. Ideals? Mr. Windbagger shouted. Would you rather have ideals or a Mercedes? He laughed fairly loudly and elbowed a man sitting behind him at another table. He repeated, Ideals or a Mercedes? Mercedes, right? The man made a nervous nod. Mr. Windbagger turned back to my dad. See, he gets it. When I sell insurance, I always speak the language people understand. Rodney, do you know what language I speak? English? I speak money. That's the international language, right? He laughed again. Perhaps we could order, Mom suggested, looking around for the waiter. Sounds good to me. Mr. Windbagger said, Rodney, you like this stuff? Not as much as a good T-bone and a baked potato. Mr. Windbagger banged his hand on the table. Donald, you may have some nutty ideas, but you're raising one heck of a boy here. You've been playing some great football, son. I've been to all your games and seen you in all those ads for that restaurant. Ethel, what's the name of that restaurant? Mama's, we all answered at once. Yeah, that's it, he agreed. Gloria, are you going to review them on Saturday when they open? Mrs. Windbagger answered for my mother. Fred, you remember what I told you. Gloria always waits a few weeks before she reviews a new restaurant. It gives them a chance to work out the kinks. She was right. My mother never reviewed restaurants when they first opened. In fact, I had secretly been hoping that Mama's might close before my mom got down there. After all, with that horrible food, how long could they stay open? I took a sip of water and tried to let my worries about the boss float away. Actually, my mom said, there's been so much buzz about Mama's that my editor wants me to review it right away. I'm going Saturday night. I choked. Mr. Windbagger's meaty palm whacked me on the back and an ice cube shot across the table. Are you all right? My dad asked. I didn't even answer. I still hadn't told my parents I was working there that night. Plus, I pictured Big Earl and Weasel serving up slop, Cheese and Willie ordering the customers around, and the guys from Chicago causing problems. I was dead. Things couldn't get any worse. Well, look who it is, Mr. Windbagger said loudly. A man and a woman, followed by two hulking sons, were shown to a table. As the boys turned around, there was no mistaking their identity. I grabbed the menu and covered my face. They were identical twins, about twice my size, wearing mean expressions. Come to eat your last supper? Mr. Windbagger asked. Shh, Fred, his wife scolded. You can't yell like that in a restaurant. Go and talk quietly to your friend. That's not my friend, he said. Then he yelled, Hey, Belichick, getting ready to lose on Saturday? Belichick? Bart and Bruno's father was the Wyndham coach? Belichick turned in his seat to face Windbagger and said, You Garrett Villers are pathetic. You finally win a couple of games, and you act like you're in the NFL playoffs. Keep talking, Belichick. I got young Rodney Rathbone at my table, and I can't wait to watch him run over your pathetic defense. My mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Windbagger had used her last name. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat because I was about to poop my pants. Take a good look, Mr. Windbagger continued. Then noticing me, he added, Rodney, stop staring at the menu and let the coach take a look at you. I slowly let the menu slide to the table. What do you think, boys? Belichick asked his sons. One of them took a sip of water and loudly crunched the ice in his mouth. The other picked up a fork and bent it into a U shape. Let me introduce you to Bart and Bruno, Belichick continued, not knowing we'd already met. We were a little late getting here tonight because we had to meet with the Notre Dame recruiter. It's pretty rare for recruiters to meet with middle school football players, but Bart leads the state in tackles, sacks, tackles for loss, and interceptions. Bruno, on the other hand, leads the county in unnecessary roughness penalties. I was about to ask if I could be excused from Earth, but Mr. Windbagger wasn't done. I hope none of them scouts will be at the game Saturday. I felt his hand grip my shoulder. Those two altar boys of yours haven't had to meet Rodney here in the hole. Best running back Garrettsville's ever seen. One of the twins said, Dad, I don't see running back listed on the menu. The other added, Guess we'll have to wait till Saturday. How do you like your running back cooked? Rare, his brother answered with a smirk. I like my running back bloody. It's also important that the meat is well tenderized. For the first time in my life, I knew how a cow felt, and I didn't like it. Looking at the two brutes, I had little doubt they had every intention of making me the main course at Saturday's game, and they had the muscles to live up to their words. It was all too much. My fate was sealed. Next Saturday was shaping up to be the worst day of my life. I suddenly needed air. Excuse me, I'll be right back. I doubted the twin goons would get up and follow me, not with so many people around. My mother looked concerned. But we haven't ordered. I'll take that Chinese spaghetti you mentioned. I crossed the restaurant and headed for the doors. Glad I brought Tums, was the last thing I heard from Mr. Windbagger as I pushed open the doors and headed outside. The night had gotten cool, and the air smelled faintly of burning leaves. I took a deep breath and tried to relax. Should I call Jessica? She was the one person I could talk to who would understand and give me advice. Should I run away? I needed a minute to think. I looked around and noticed a bench in a little garden surrounded by tall, trimmed hedges. I sat down and ran my fingers through my hair. After a minute, I heard the restaurant door open. Were my parents looking for me? Were the twins looking for me? That is good news, I heard a man say. I assumed he was on a cell phone. Relieved that it wasn't the twins, I exhaled and was about to call Jessica, but stopped when I heard the man's next words. So you've managed to record almost all the G-Men plays? Staying hidden in the shadows, I turned around and peeked through the bushes. It was Belichiet. He was about 2 feet away with his back toward me. After a pause, I heard him continue on the phone. That's more than I'd hoped for. Oh, I know I won't need their playbook, but what kind of coach would I be if I didn't dot my I's and cross my T's? Now that's what I call tutoring. Great. See you tomorrow. Good work, Agent Orange. He hung up and walked back into the restaurant. For a few minutes longer, I sat on the bench and debated my next move. I knew I had to head back in, but I needed time to absorb everything. Thanks to old Windbagger, it was now certain that the two biggest, toughest kids in the state would take me apart on Saturday. If that wasn't enough, their dad was working with a certain orange-haired tutor named Mrs. Lutzkraut to learn our plays ahead of time. My mind felt like it was going to explode. This was all too much for a kid my age. It was only Monday night. What would Tuesday bring, an earthquake? I couldn't take it anymore. Eventually, I managed to stumble back inside and sit at the table. You were gone for a while, honey, my mom said. Are you all right? I was pretty far from all right. I wasn't even sure of what to say. I was in a fog for the rest of the meal. I vaguely remember nibbling on some food and trying not to make eye contact with the twins. The one time I did, either Bart or Bruno mouthed the word you while pointing down at his chicken. I remember my stomach doing flips as I watched him repeatedly stab the chicken with his fork. His bent fork. I turned to Mr. Windbagger. Did I hear you say you had Tums? It was the start of the toughest week of my life. And that is the end of the chapter.